to switch over to a series of three panels on clusters of industries. The first one now being industrials, energy, logistics. So,
good afternoon, everyone. I'll just give a quick run through on my bio and advanced manufacturing, and then I really want to turn over this wonderful panel. So Mark asked me to kind of step in and MC while other things are going on. So as I mentioned to you earlier, I'm the managing director for advanced manufacturing and aerospace. Been with Jobs Ohio about 7 years. Came out of industry with 3+ decades of experience. Worked in aerospace and automotive with Honeywell. Was off highway with Dana, and did some energy work with Rolls-Royce Energy Systems, actually here in Mount Vernon, Ohio, for about 4 years. And my education, have a master's degree in engineering and in business from University of Notre Dame, and also a bachelor's degree in engineering from Purdue University. So that's who I am. If you jump to the next slide, my responsibility, as I mentioned, is really to monitor trends and set strategy for Ohio with regard to advanced manufacturing and aerospace. This slide, unfortunately, is a little bit condensed, but really what I wanted to tell you, since a lot of you don't necessarily know Ohio, what's important about it? It's the land of innovation, right? We created the aerospace industry. We created the flip-top can, the tire industry and polymers out of Akron. The list of the Edison, obviously born here, created the light bulb and the phonograph. The list goes on. So innovation is in our DNA, and when you look at the state, you've got really a unique state with the 3 C's: Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati, Dayton, and Toledo, all fairly major MSAs. And you look, and you've got assets in each one of those. NASA Glenn up in Cleveland, you've got Wright-Patterson Air Force Research Labs and Life Cycle Management in Dayton. You've got Patel here in Columbus. 80+ campuses, graduating engineers and technical students, STEM students. We're the third largest, as I mentioned, third largest manufacturing state. So innovation is in our DNA, and we all know, and we're going to learn more about that tomorrow, about the importance of innovation to really keep manufacturing relevant. So from my perspective, I have a big responsibility. I have a responsibility to ensure that we're protecting our industry, and also growing it. So in this disruptive environment, that's huge. Talent, because we're the third largest, we have talent. Now, do we have a talent challenge just like everybody else? Yes, but at least we have the baseline to work from, and that's important, hugely important. Market access. If you take a look at where we are, we're geographically blessed. We're sitting here right in the middle of the Midwest. 60% of the population in the United States is east of the Mississippi, and we're located halfway between the coast and the Mississippi, kind of halfway between New York and Chicago. So you can get there in a day. It's great stuff. You got access to your customers, you got access to your supply chain. What more do you need? Corporate leadership, we've got great companies, GE Aviation, Sherwin-Williams, Root Insurance, a number of Eaton, Parker Hannifin, Meggitt. I could go on. Great companies here in Ohio. Why? Because they thrive here in Ohio. So I want you to realize that it's much more. Jobs Ohio does much more than just offer financial incentives and connections. We are a B2B business partner, and we help companies engage across all of these pillars to help make them successful. If they're not successful, we're not successful. So it's really our responsibility to help. Next slide, please. We have to set strategy. We monitor trends. This slide speaks to it. I'm not going to go through everything, but fundamentally, COVID's been a major impact. It's exposed vulnerabilities in supply chain like we never thought existed. Lots of risk, material shortages, price increases. We heard about all that today. What's going on, resilient supply chains, people are reacting to all of that we've learned in this, PPE being the most prolific example on supply chain disruption. Technology disruptions too, and it's really an amazing time. A lot of things happening. productivity only happens through technology. So fundamentally, that's the challenge. That's where we're focused: additive, automation, electrification, sustainability, autonomy, all part of the disruption going on. And then, of course, talent and workforce. So our strategy in advanced manufacturing is really, kind of broken down into three things. We want to attract more OEMs, tier ones. We want to grow and protect our installed base. How are we going to do that? We're focused on smart manufacturing. We've got a great cluster up in the Northeast that we're trying to leverage across the state. We're working on a modernization trial program within Jobs Ohio that recognizes prosperity as opposed to just job growth. And we're also looking at several talent initiatives, and you're going to hear more about those as we go. And then my strategy, my team's strategy is a AAA strategy, really focused on technologies. That's additive manufacturing, advanced materials, and automation. And those three permeate advanced manufacturing. And we really lean in and try to pick strategic projects in order to fund, to drive those initiatives. The next slide's on aerospace, so I think we can end here. I want to get back to what we all came to hear is our panelists talk. So I'm gonna, I don't know if we have slides to queue up or not, but at least put the panel names up and we'll go through, let them introduce themselves and talk a little bit. Very good. I think what we're going to do, we're going to start off with with Catherine, the lady on the team here. Catherine is from Nottingham Spurk. We just had John Nottingham up here to share the video and talk about it. So Catherine, if you would introduce yourself and what you do with Nottingham Spurk and a little bit about what advanced manufacturing means. Try this one.
So thanks everybody, and thanks to Mark for inviting me. John Nottingham kind of stole the show earlier, so you guys know where I work, and he's my boss, and we hope to see you there tomorrow. But, I met Mark, and I've worked for 8 single-family offices and all over the world. I'm a New Yorker. I lived in Switzerland and London, and then I was hired by a firm in Cleveland, and I had never been to Cleveland. And boy, was I missing out. So we hope to see you tomorrow. I'll let the rest of my panel go into more detail, but it is really exciting to work for this firm that's made such an impact. But also, we work on all of the themes Glenn talked about. And part of the reason why we're here is because we don't generate all these amazing ideas internally. We get them from outside industry, firms, investment firms, family offices. So all of the advanced manufacturing and aerospace, auto, all of those consumer products, medical devices are things that we can work on with you. So really that was the message, and I can go into more detail.
Jonathan, if you'd like to go, or hand it over to Matthew to start it off. I know you two kind of collaborate. You could go.
So I'll do a quick introduction. So as Glenn has indicated, I'm one of the Jobs Ohio managing directors. So again, my name is Jonathan Bridges. I'm the managing director of automotive at Jobs Ohio. I've been at Jobs Ohio about 6 years. Prior to that, actually was at Dana Corporation prior to Glenn, and then spent a few years at the University of Toledo managing capital projects and investments for the 3 campuses of the university, and about 15 years with Chrysler, Daimler Chrysler again, FCA, in various aspects of engineering, operations, finance. I was the quantitative economist at Chrysler and the chief NAFTA economist at Daimler. So my background, different from Glenn's, but very much in the same space. I'm an economist, so I look at things a little bit differently, and so I guess we'll talk about that as we move forward.
Jonathan, your slide is up, just so you know.
Oh, should I go?
If you want to address that real quick.
Why don't we do intros and then
Yeah.
background? So thank you. Welcome everybody. Matthew Friedman, principal owner and CEO of Bear Diversified, a group of companies based in Cleveland, Ohio. Cleveland, Ohio companies called Northern Stamping. We're a automotive supplier principally to General Motors, but also to what is now Stellantis and a couple of others. We've seen a lot of growth since I bought the company back in 2009, actually started in 96 and was grateful to have the opportunity to buy the company back. We've grown from 29 million in 2009 up to 150 million just in Ohio. We have a huge future trajectory. A lot of what we've done is through the help of Jonathan, Jobs Ohio. We actually are seeing is a result of the craziness in the industry between the GM strike that occurred in 2019, the COVID shutdown, the semiconductor shortage now, that there's this huge pent-up demand that you've heard for already. So at a time where things are really condensed and slowed down, we're actually ramping up tremendously to get positioned to take advantage of this new demand, and actually are working closely with the Ohio Department of Development to provide a bond for us to add 9 new robotic weld cells and revamp a formerly abandoned lumber warehouse and transform it into a state-of-the-art manufacturing facility. So I've kind of been working with Mark and the rest of the 361 team to add that kind of down in the trenches sense of what's been going on since the pandemic.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Kevin Chambers. As Jonathan and Glenn are, I also come to you from Jobs Ohio, where I'm the Managing Director for Logistics, Distribution, and Supply Chain. Today marks my 365th day with Jobs Ohio, and prior to that, I retired as a partner with a Big Four consulting firm with a very clear focus on supply chain, where I led a number of practices both nationally and globally. And I'm also a retired military officer. We've seen a lot of change in the year that I've been with Jobs Ohio, certainly, as driven by the pandemic. Who would have thought how important cold storage was? Who would have known the impact of shutting down shipping from the Far East for a period of time, and how that would trickle throughout our entire supply chain, or, God forbid, a boat gets sideways in a canal, right? But at the same time, we've seen e-commerce and the need for distribution and fulfillment and automation of those sorts of facilities become extremely important. So there are a lot of trends happening in the logistics and supply chain industry. And while it's a standalone industry, it's also a very significant enabler of almost every other industry that we talk about. So thanks for having me here, and let's keep moving.
Kevin, since we have you right here and we have your slide up, if you wouldn't mind, we'll get started, and then we'll go right back down the table. So, Kevin, you did talk about the fact that your industry really supports a lot of different verticals. It's really critical, and we've seen e-commerce and the importance of that. If you would maybe take us down a little bit deeper into how your strategies for this sector are addressing the trends and what the opportunities are.
Thanks, Glenn. So, as was mentioned earlier, I think by you, Glenn, Ohio sits at an extremely strong geographic place when we talk about distribution and fulfillment centers and that sort of activity, because moving goods and services, whether they be in or out of distribution centers, we're within 1 day's drive of 60% of the U.S. and Canada population. A 600-mile radius around the state of Ohio puts you even on the other side of the Mississippi, but anywhere up and down the eastern seaboard. So it's a great geographic location. We have the 3rd most highway linear miles, the 4th most rail miles, and when you couple that with 13 intermodal sites, we're able to move goods in and out, both raw materials for production and finished goods and materials that need to go elsewhere. So it's a very good geographic location. And when you think about that Midwestern work ethic, a lot of organizations have continue to choose Ohio to be their national distribution center or significant regional distribution centers. So great location. we see a lot of big names up there, but I think my strategy, Glenn, has been focused on making sure that those organizations that need to come to Ohio because they're spreading a blanket across the country, that they're welcome here, they understand how they can best fit in here, but also helping to attract those organizations when they're looking for that one place to go. And I know JP spoke this morning, and others have spoken about the many advantages that Ohio brings from a tax perspective and other areas like that. We have a very strong team of individuals across all sectors that can attract organizations to come here, but it's really been a very good time for us, because when you put it all together and the way we've responded to COVID, the way our revenue stream at Jobs Ohio has stayed strong, as JP mentioned this morning, we continue to see success. So I'm focused on helping to understand and make connections with those organizations that really need to find a good place where they can reach most of the country, and that's really what Ohio brings us.
Great, thank you, Kevin. One area that Kevin and I overlap on is I have responsibility for aerospace, and of course today we are talking awful lot about drones. And drones will play a part in logistics, and I know Kevin's fully aware of that. We've got a number of efforts going on to work on developing use cases for FAA to demonstrate drone delivery for medical supplies, for drugs, and for organs. We're also working with Kroger down south, with a company called Drone Express to deliver groceries in prepackaged forms. And we're going to continue to lead in that space. Kevin, I don't know if you have anything to add in that regard, but I know it's certainly an important area for myself in aerospace.
Well, I think, as you know, Glenn, Ohio is leaning forward very, very strongly when it comes to the use of automated delivery, drones, whatever we want to, there are a number of different things that I hadn't even thought about before really digging into this. We're talking, and the Ohio Department of Transportation is leading the way on this. We're talking about a lot of very large delivery platforms, whether they be in the air or on the ground, that are going to be automated to a certain extent as we go forward. And it's great to see some of the local and regional airports in the state of Ohio link up with some of the government agencies and step forward as places of innovation for automated transportation. And we're seeing that in Springfield. We're seeing some other locations that I won't mention, but it's very exciting to see where we're going to go with that, Glenn.
Is platooning a big part of what we're doing as well? Platooning, the caravanning of cargo trucks?
We're seeing test cases not only on the ground with trucks, but we're seeing it in the air with small aircraft and even medium-sized aircraft where there will be a lead vehicle and others will follow it, whether it be, again, in the air or on the ground. And to me, that was mind-blowing to think about a year ago. Think about 10 or 12 aircraft flying across the sky, 11 of them without pilots because they're all linked up through automation. And we've seen test cases of that now, not only in Ohio, but Ohio working with neighboring states to understand how that can work on the ground across state lines with all the technology that's available. So I'm very excited to see where that takes us.
Thank you, Kevin. Jonathan, Matthew, I'm not sure how you'd like to address this. I'm happy to let you guys choose who to kick this off.
So here, let me just do an intro, and then Jonathan, I'll let you fill in. So we've been working with Jobs Ohio really for a number of years. You talk about advanced automation. We kind of are the poster child of that on a smaller scale, and Ohio has been perfect for us because a lot of our critical vendors, Lincoln Electric up near us in Cleveland and AIDA down in Dayton, from a servo press technology standpoint, have been critical for us. Northern Stamping was always the little company that was able to compete against the much larger competitors, Flexing Gates, Magna Corporation, and where we've been able to compete is in our engineering and our technology, and we would not have been able to make those large ticket item investments but for the help we've gotten from the state of Ohio. And Jonathan, since he's joined, has been critical with working with us as we've had a vision that sometimes has a story to it, but we've been able to put action behind our words.
Thank you. So maybe you can mention what type of part is yours. Can you mention your
Okay, so the actual parts. So trailer hitches, right? So just anybody who has a trailer hitch on a General Motors or a Jeep brand pickup or SUV most likely has one of our trailer hitches on it.
Yeah, and so we talk about the various aspects of the automotive supply chain, right? And so that is a common part that you don't really think about until you need it, and that it's highly critical. And so we see this spectrum in the industry, right, where you talk about how the industry is transforming, whether that is from our traditional industry to what we consider our advanced new part of our industry. I think my slide might be up, right? So, everyone knows, at least it's highlighted there, right? We've got some pretty big OEMs. Some of those names you'll probably mention that are either in the light vehicle space, cars you would probably drive yourselves, or commercial vehicle space, vehicles that move product, like Kevin was mentioning. And so what we're seeing in the industry, though, is, to Glenn's point earlier, is we want to protect what we see as our base, right? The types of manufacturing that Matthew was talking about, the OEMs that we're referring to on the screen behind us. But what we really are seeing now currently is a transformation in the industry, right? And from a propulsion standpoint. And the good and the bad of that, right? And everyone's looking for opportunities for investment, right? So the good and the bad of that is the OEMs have telegraphed and told the public that transformation is here when it comes to propulsion. And we are gravitating towards alternatives, not ICE, not diesel, but particularly electric or fuel cell, right? And so as we see the industry moving forward, what we are really targeting is how does Ohio maintain its advantage in the automotive ecosystem? And when I say that, you may not recognize that Ohio is the largest producer of engines in the United States. We're the second largest producer of transmissions in the United States. So, products like Matthew is producing or common parts that go into engines and transmissions, that's our bread and butter. But the OEMs have already telegraphed that the industry is in transformation. And so how are we, as part of our goal at being Jobs Ohio, how do we inform the state and ensure that Ohio maintains its competitive advantage? So what we are targeting particularly now is in the battery space. And if you know, you've probably seen Northeast Ohio, we want a battery plant, right? That's fabulous. They actually announced another one down in Tennessee. That's great as well. The big reason that that's great is because now that we're seeing the growth in that space of the finished product, batteries, now you're going to begin to see the growth of the supply chain. It's backwards because the supply chain doesn't exist here. And so to Kevin's point earlier, right, where Ohio is situated geographically, right, we can't change geography, we benefit from geography. Geography in the automotive ecosystem, we know that our friends up north are pretty strong when it comes to the automotive space. We don't have to mention names, we know who they are. But we also recognize that there's a lot of gravity going towards the south. I have a map, and it's not on this slide deck, but you see a lot of automotive assembly plants, right? Those are the whales. You have to feed the whale, right? An automotive assembly plant produces a vehicle. They produce vehicles about every old days, probably about every 35 to 45 seconds a vehicle would come off the line. The gravity of the automotive industry remains in the northern part of the U.S., and where we are situated in the automotive ecosystem is extremely strong because all of the automotive OEM assembly plants, the majority of them reside well within our 8-hour drive from Ohio. What's really important about that is as we continue to see the industry transform, we're going to see the growth of the next phase of propulsion, batteries, and then we're going to see the growth and gravitation of the supply chain to support that. We can't change geography, but we benefit from geography. You can't change where chemicals come from, that's geology, but we can change how they are processed and where. And so Ohio is beginning to gravitate that activity as well to support what we see as the battery industry, which is the next phase of the automotive and actually aerospace industry as well, because they're using a lot of my batteries too. So I say my batteries, our batteries.
So Jonathan, I can actually support that. So for the next generation, for most of the pickups, General Motors is actually making sure a certain percentage are going to be based upon the EV. And so for that, they reached out to traditional suppliers like ourselves. So we are going to be launching for the first electric pickup for GM, the Power Electric Carrier, which is a fancy name for a battery tray. So they're going with those that they know are close, that can feed all their satellite plants, but that they have an existing relationship with. So you didn't even know that, but that's already happening.
Thank you. Thank you both. I know we could go at length into the way that Jobs Ohio and Ohio ODOT is leaning into this advanced technology in terms of EVs as well as autonomous vehicles, but our time is short, so maybe we'll save that for offline. I did want to give Catherine an opportunity to talk a little bit more about what's going on at Nottingham Spurk. I know you can't necessarily talk about your current projects, but can you fill in a little bit of the space here that exists on what you're doing with advanced manufacturing?
Absolutely. And we are connected with Jobs Ohio as well. So this new innovation center with Ernst & Young, which is unbelievable, so I can't wait to show it off to all of you, is a part of that network. And all of these industries we're talking about, people associate, like I said, the Midwest kind of old school industries. Well, guess what? I mean, you can innovate these old school industries. and like what they're doing with batteries and things like that. And these are investment opportunities for all of us. We don't need the coasts to innovate for us. We can do that here. We have the talent and the drive. So, for example, one of our investments was Jacuzzi. We bought that. And that has been innovated since Ronald Reagan was in office. I mean, most women hate jacuzzis because they don't self-clean, they're messy. You're thinking, how can this be a category leader? But it's just not a great product. Why not buy it and transform it? You know, and those are the things we can do in all of these industries. And those are opportunities for wherever you live. So that's what we're trying to do here. And we've done, have had a great partnership with Jobs Ohio, but we also love partnering with people everywhere. So it's exciting to see family offices from all over the world here, and funds, and also our local partners here too, because I think there's just a lot to be done in these old school industries. I mean, they're not going away, they just need to be transformed, they just need to be innovated.
We learned recently, as we began several decades ago to envision the United States as a service entity and a design entity and throw the dirty manufacturing over the wall. We learned that that doesn't work because we missed out on the evolutional innovation that takes place in getting your hands dirty. You all never lost sight of that. You bring that, and you're leveraging that base in Ohio and helping it to transform.
Well, you know what's interesting too is I speak to investors and funds all over the world, and they were saying, for example, like a metalworks factory and a foundry, that the United States actually was cheaper to operate and employ than in China and Brazil now. I mean, that's incredible. That's really changed. Why can't we do more manufacturing here? I mean, we still make things. And that's really exciting. And I think that opportunity is here. And, you know, Peloton is moving here. I mean, there's a lot of great things happening in this state and this location. So it's a great location. And the cost of living, I mean, there's just a lot to say about it.
Thank you, Catherine. We have just a couple of minutes left. I did want to give you all an opportunity to ask this panel any questions that might be on your mind. So please take advantage of the opportunity.
So a question to Jonathan. You'd mentioned automotive. In light of the fact that BMW is incorporating hemp now into their facility in the Carolinas, I'm wondering if we have any such ambitions here in the U.S.
I'm sorry, I missed part of it.
Industrial hemp for the manufacture of panels, insulation, other automotive products.
So, I mean, those are innovations that BMW is doing specifically. I mean, I'll be honest with you. If I were having conversations with companies that were doing R&D in that space, I wouldn't be able to talk to you about it because we'd be in violation of IP. But again, those are the types of innovations, you know, back to Glenn's point earlier about R&D. I mean, we partner with companies that want to do R&D in the state of Ohio, regardless of the industry. So that particular instance could be something that, you know, would be lightweighting for automotive, definitely could be used for aerospace as well.
Thank you.
I'm interested to know what Jobs Ohio and the companies here are doing about the EV charging networks, perhaps to accommodate the new EVs, and then home charging products. Maybe that's a new item to manufacture.
Jonathan, you want to speak to that? Or I can as well. But.
So one of the things that, well, two things. So from a charging infrastructure, actually, the state of Ohio has recognized that Jobs Ohio has been able to support. So there are actually two studies that the Ohio Department of Transportation, via their group Drive Ohio, which is kind of their mobility group, they completed two vehicle charging infrastructure studies. They completed the light vehicle study, I think, about a year ago. I think the commercial vehicle study should be out public the next month or so. So again, what that does is identify the gaps in the infrastructure. You talk about food deserts, you know, charging deserts, right? And so I think, one, that gives opportunity and insight to companies that want to invest in that space. The other part, when it comes to charging companies or companies that want to either manufacture third-party chargers or those types of things, that is absolutely an area that we are actively pursuing and trying to be aggressive to support. if that answers. Okay.
I just add on to that. So ODOT, Ohio Department of Transportation, has oversight over most of that, but they're working in conjunction with a number of our MSA planning organizations so that we have collaboration across how we deploy, to allocate some of the money, federal dollars associated with this as well as state dollars, but how we deploy it in a way that makes sense, that continues to expand it from, the major corridors on out into the rural areas. So we do have a developing plan that's going on in that regard. We have a NASA challenge that we won, that ODOT won, and part of that is not only developing use cases to fly and develop the FAA regs, but it's also to work with communities on community engagement for the deployment of autonomous vehicles and EV charging, because they kind of go hand in hand. So we're as told by NASA, Ohio is at the forefront of leading in terms of developing these technologies and engaging with some of our communities for the deployment. So that's NASA telling us that based on what they see across the nation, Ohio is leading in this regard.
It should be on the Ohio Department of Transportation's website. If you look under Drive Ohio, EV charging study. The other thing I'd like to mention to the charging point, not to say charge point, but we talk about light vehicle and charging. They're doing as much activity in the air. So as we talk about on the ground and in the air, my aerospace friends with vertical takeoff and landing, Glenn.
Yeah, that's thank you, Jonathan, because in Ohio, and we'll soon be launching a new brand around this. I wish I could say it. We have it combined. We've put together our ODOT is Fly Ohio, Drive Ohio. We're working to integrate autonomy both in the air and on the ground, and all of the systems and infrastructure required. So, some really exciting things happening in that regard. I think we've exhausted our time today. So, thank you very much. Please give a hand to the panel. Take advantage of their knowledge and expertise in the hallways and around the room. Thank you.
Over to you. This is a consumer-ish cluster here. As you'll see in the final panel is more of a tech cluster.
Thanks, Mark. Whoa. If I could ask the panelists to head on up to the stage. So obviously we have a limited amount of time and we're covering a number of industries, but there will be breakouts, so you can ask and have discussion with the panelists later on in that session. I'm going to do a similar format to the last panel and ask each speaker to do a brief introduction and give some background, and then I'll turn it over to some questions from my end and then open it up to the audience. And we have about half hour. Maddox has to leave 5 minutes early because it takes him a little longer to get around. But he's flown in all the way from New York to attend, so please make sure you say hi to all the panelists afterwards. So why don't you start off, Maddox, and give an intro.
Thanks, Anna. My name is Maddox Swenson. I'm the founder and general partner of L2 Ventures. We are a venture and growth investment firm focused on investments in the cannabis industry, particularly technology and infrastructure companies that are building kind of the digital rails of this industry, as well as branded consumer products. Prior to launching L2, I co-led M&A and investments at IAC, focused on both minority and controlled transactions across different technology platforms that were helping facilitate the offline to online transition across a number of different industries.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Brooke Radisky. I am the vice president at Colley Capital. Colley Capital is the family office for Matt Colley, who is the founder of a company called Leaf Filter Gutter Protection, which is now known as Leaf Home. We're based in Hudson, Ohio. And so the Colley Capital is really the arm that's the traditional family office for Matt. We're actually branded as the Colley Companies. We have a NASCAR team, a wealth management firm, a media brand, and some other aspects that fall under there. But our division at Colley Capital is really investing in private equity and then real estate. And on the private equity side, we have a heavy focus on consumer, again, kind of related to the leaf filter product. And so that's part of my purpose on this panel today.
Hello, everyone. I'm Steve Davis. I'm the former chairman and CEO for Bob Evans Farms, based here in Ohio. Prior to that, I spent 14 years with Yum Brands, working on some of your favorites: Pizza Hut, Long John Silver's, A&W, Taco Bell, and KFC. And then I spent about 9 years in consumer packaged goods with Kraft General Foods. Currently, I serve on the boards of, it says IND director, so I guess I'm an independent director. I'm an independent director for Marathon Petroleum Corporation, Pittsburgh Paint and Glass, otherwise known as PPG Industries, American Eagle Outfitters, and the Albertsons Company. Albertsons was IPO'd a little bit about a year ago. I've served on corporate boards since 2006. A couple of boards that I served on that I'm no longer a part of is CenturyLink, which is now Lumens Corporation. I was on the Walgreens board when we did the Boots transaction, which was transformational and turned them from Walgreens to Walgreens Boots Alliance. I was on the Sonic Restaurant board, and also was part of a group of African Americans that launched the first SPAC. It was called the Legacy Acquisition Group, and we successfully did a transaction. So currently do board advisory work, serve on boards, and also do private equity consulting.
My name is Barry Adams. I want to be Steve's friend. I'm managing partner of Prairie Crest Capital. We are a venture capital firm that does early stage investing in ag tech and deep tech. We have a focus on things that are built. That's why we like coming to Columbus in Ohio. And we generally will review minority founders with a purpose to invest. And I will tell you, we founded our firm in Des Moines, Iowa. You know, we look at the top 1% to 2% of all investable assets, and we do deep diligence dives. But we also find that in the Midwest, there's certain things that are overlooked by both of the coasts, and that's where we thrive.
Hello, everyone. Hey, I am Carmen Brace. I am the CEO and founder of Aclara Research. We are a cannabis insights and data platform that is serving the needs of consumer packaged goods, healthcare, and cannabis clients with expanding legal adoption of cannabis. We have also partnered with two global data companies, Nielsen and Ipsos, on our go-to-market strategy to help CPG and healthcare clients understand the impact of cannabis on wellness and recreation. A bit about me. I am a former CPG executive, always leveraging data to drive market share for my clients, for the likes of ConAgra Foods, Mars Wrigley, and Campbell Soup. So really great to be here today and talk about what expanding legal cannabis access means for our country and for the state.
Thank you to all the panelists. Appreciate it. So I'm going to do my best to string together a wide range of industries, but I think it was already kind of done, interestingly enough, from Carmen, in terms of the data and analytics side being tied not only into the cannabis side, but also to healthcare. But I'll ask this. You know, we're in Ohio. Obviously, we had heard from several folks now from Jobs Ohio. The focus here is innovation and government support to let the private sector thrive. Cannabis is not yet here, but interestingly, I'm going to be talking to folks from the organization about when it does arrive. But in terms of innovation and growth, if the panelists could comment on, what do you see as the biggest and most exciting aspect of what's happening in your industries that you're involved with in terms of growth drivers, and what are some of the biggest challenges to really scale that growth up and take it to the next level? Whoever would like to start.
I think it would be an understatement to say that we learned a lot from what happened with COVID-19. So I serve on a couple different company boards, as you heard, and so whenever I go to the board meeting, the first question I'd ask myself is, was COVID something that accelerated us to move faster? So in the case of Albertsons, people were getting their groceries delivered and picking them up probably at 2 to 5%. Well, that doubled and tripled overnight. So all of a sudden, we needed employees. I think we hired 80,000 people in a span of 6 months. People didn't want to go to the grocery stores, but then we had to get them groceries, so then people wanted to come to the parking lots and get it picked up, or they wanted it delivered. Fortunately, we had made a lot of the investments to do that. So that's a case where COVID actually accelerated the innovation. In the case of American Eagle Outfitters, because you were either deemed as an essential business, as you're well aware, and date me a little bit, you were deemed essential or not, and you weren't deemed essential. I don't want to say you were not essential, but if you were a business that wasn't deemed essential, you pretty much had to close your doors. So think about being a clothing retailer where you live from season to season 4 times a year. And if you're American Eagle Outfitters, the summer season and the back-to-school season, it's kind of make or break for the year. So what it did is it forced the company to not only close their stores, but then reopen them with new merchandise, but then also change the way of thinking. For those of you who are in the retail business, one of the sayings is, stack it high and watch it fly, right? So you bring in all this inventory, you bring it into the stores, you hope to sell it, and you hope to discount it as little as you possibly can. Well, that changed overnight because all of a sudden consumers didn't want to come into the stores, even after the COVID restrictions were lifted. So that all the investments that we made in e-commerce started to pay off. So as you think about what COVID did, it made us think leaner and meaner. And then the other thing, and I'm sure everybody in this room can relate with this, working capital became a topic of discussion for everybody. Because all of a sudden, when you shut your business down, how do you still pay your bills? How do you pay your employees? What do you do with your employees? And the final thing I'll say, if you were a company, and this is where cultural capitalism really comes into play, if you were an inclusive company and you really did build culture and really focused on culture, coming out of COVID, you were a much better performer because you did the right things by your employees. Because the number one issue that employees had coming out of COVID is, are you creating a safe environment? One of the things American Eagle Outfitters did when they reopened the stores, they invested in, you go to some of the doctor's offices or maybe to the airport and you put your face in the reader and then the reader tells you what your temperature is. We put that in all of our stores, all of our warehouses. So think about the message that sends to your employees. But I hadn't joined the board yet, so I was doing my little espionage before the interview. And when I walked up and saw that myself and I could gauge my own temperature, I said, now, not only is that a win for the employees, it's also a win for the customers. So this whole notion of innovation and disruption, it was interesting how COVID did the disruption to many of us, but we had to rebound, we had to rethink our entire business model, and I think the companies that did that well are going to be the beneficiaries. And I think you see that same thing happening here in Ohio.
So I think our answer is twofold for this. So one, the disruptions of the past year really changed how we look at investing. And so while it's not directly consumer related, we realized during COVID how much exposure we had to hotels, which traditionally and historically was great. Some of the top tier hotels in the country we were affiliated with, and then you step into a pandemic-like era where people aren't going to hotels, and that was really unprecedented. But it also created new avenues for us to make investments in. One of them is a grocery app and delivery service, so exactly to your point, but prior to the pandemic, there would be no way that our team would have looked at groceries, just given the margins and some of the logistical issues. But the innovation in the area really allowed us to step up, and that investment is one of our only very, very few venture investments. But we really believed in the space and believed that the space needed to be disrupted. And we really continue to use data continuously. So Matt's company, the original leaf filter, it wasn't gutters that made that company successful. It was data and taking that data and transforming it into sales. And so while we still own a relatively significant portion of that business, as we go and look at other businesses, whether they are control investments or just something that we're co-investing with, we say, okay, well, how can we take these best practices from data and transforming data into action in the way that leaf filter did, and do that with other industries, whether it's something else in the home product space, or we own a syrup company that makes syrups and sauces for coffee shops. We actually just sold that 2 weeks ago, but we owned it during COVID, and so part of the question is how can you take data and transform it into something really amazing, which I believe, Carmen, is what you were saying. Also, I'll just pass it on to you.
Perfect segue. I mean, when you think about how we leverage data to drive insights and business results, that's essentially why we're looking at how we create models that help us create better business decisions. When I think about opportunities and challenges within the cannabis space, I mean, let's think about the industry, right? So it's about a $20 billion industry as of last year. About 36 states offer legal access to cannabis across the United States, of course, Ohio being one of them. And when we think about, the impact that we all had, from a mental, socioeconomic perspective within the pandemic, the desire and the need for increased relaxation, a decrease of anxiety, a decrease of depression, all of those things are elements and need states, the reasons why consumers are using cannabis on an ongoing basis. And, we can look no further than the Gallup organization to know that, the percentage of people, the percentage of U.S. consumers that are using cannabis is growing and further. Our partners at Nielsen, as an example, as of last year, about 31% of all households within the United States have purchased a legal cannabinoid. So when you think about that, that's 30% of households across the United States that have purchased a legal cannabinoid. That rivals many traditional CPG categories in terms of household penetration. Now, we've got a while to go in terms of that purchase frequency, but when you think about the increase for the reasons that people are using cannabis, and again, we can look no further than anxiety, depression, and desire to relax, without a number of the adverse effects of a number of prescription drugs, alcohol, a number of other elements, that's what has consumer packaged goods and healthcare watching this industry. When I think about, the challenges, of course, when we understand that it is not about really getting high, but it's about getting well, I think the challenge is to really change the perception of why people are using cannabinoids across the United States. And if we're able to change that perception, which I know we are on an ongoing basis, and I think, look no further than the acquisition of GW Pharma by Jazz Pharmaceuticals for about $7 billion earlier this year, focused on the sleep remedies and medications for this element. This is just another element and another indicator to everyone that cannabis is here to stay, that it's not about getting high, it is about getting well, and that many major companies, across healthcare and well as consumer packaged goods are paying attention and buying data and insights to make better business decisions.
Thanks, Carmen. Just to echo some of the things that Carmen had said, I think one of the things that's so fascinating about cannabis is how many different industries it touches. So that's definitely one, whether it's pharma, food, health and wellness in other ways. I think the interesting thing we saw with COVID is it just pulled forward, like it did with many other industries, one, decreasing the stigmatization of it, but it pulled forward this acceptance of what is going to be probably a $500 billion global industry at some point. The interesting thing about this industry is that unlike retail and Albertsons going through this transition, they have years of infrastructure that they've built to serve the consumer and businesses in a way that was done for a long period of time. the supply chain in this industry is being developed today in 2021, and so there's an enormous digital component of what is physical infrastructure. So, to one of the things that, Carmen is solving is leveraging that data to make decisions, capital investment decisions around, what should your warehouses look like? What are the lead times? What is a proper delivery cadence to your customers? All these things didn't exist, and so the kind of blank canvas to build an industry from scratch has a very heavy digital component. And as a result, you've seen a handful of companies that have garnered 40 to 50% market share, on the B2B side. One of our portfolio companies services 20% of all online ordering for cannabis in the U.S. And so, because you didn't have this infrastructure, the amount of growth and the speed at which these companies have been able to scale has been pretty dramatic. So I'll leave it at that.
Quickly, I will say in the VC arena, COVID-19 led to either an offensive strategy or a defensive strategy, both on growth and valuation. So for ourselves, we took an offensive strategy for our portfolio. We had one company that digitized international shipping, and that company, on an offensive strategy, got investments from the Walton family and the Cargill family. A second investment we had that created vegan leather, vegan plastic, and that company received investments from Ralph Lauren, BMW, Allbirds, and Smart Shirts. A third company, which is why I'm here in Ohio, is that the company just received a partnership with the American Heart Association, and we're going to co-lead it with a family office in Iowa. So in Ohio, I'm from Iowa, so let's slip of the tongue. In Ohio. So these offensive versus defensive strategies were very important to the VC business as people still looked at that growth curve, and many of the early stage companies did not meet that growth curve because of either consumer demand or a change in taste. So I think that's the most important thing, and that's why we're here in Ohio.
Thank you. I'm going to open it up to the audience for questions, and if there's no questions, I have plenty more to ask, but we have about 7 minutes left, so I want to make sure, given the distinguished panel we have here, people have a chance to interact, and as a reminder, there is a breakout session that you can chat further in. Any questions from the audience? No? Okay. Well, I'll keep going then. In terms of the economic cycle that we just kind of are going through here with COVID, everybody touched on that, and everybody touched on the value of data analytics. As you look at China being one of the biggest rivals the U.S. has today in a number of industries, and as well as the fact that they're quite astute at gathering information about their own citizens, other countries' citizens, et cetera. I'm not picking on China, I'm just stating what are facts. Where do you see the U.S. And Europe and other countries and regions kind of counteracting the speed at which China might be focusing on that innovation, and how do we tie that into kind of bottom-up approaches too? What are some technologies, some brands, some unique aspects of American companies that we can further kind of bolster to be more competitive into the future? Nobody wants to take that.
I'll start and I'll pass it down. I will say that one of the investments we're looking to close next month is around artificial intelligence in research. Remember when we were in college, we'd read these white papers and get out our yellow markers and kind of go through the whole thing. Well, and now we're going to intensify the acceleration of research by with artificial intelligence, you know, so ask a question that can be answered in a second. And these type of capabilities are going to, once again, put, you know, American innovation on top of the world.
I had the privilege of, when we were at Young Brands, David Novak used to bring in authors of the popular reading at the time, Built to Last, and was one of the books that came out, and you know, Collins came in to talk with us, and he talked about the great companies and the good companies. Remember, good and great. And so I was able to ask him a question, and I said, the one thing you said is that there wasn't a difference between the good and the great companies in terms of the data they had. So what really distinguished the great companies from the good companies? And he kind of looked up and said, it's a good question. He said, the good companies, not the great companies, have the data, but they seem to either be in a funk or they don't act on it. The great companies take action. And so, and sorry to personalize this a little bit, but when I was a new brand assistant at Kraft, and this is back in the 80s, and being a University of Chicago geek, you know, we all into data analytics, but if you recall, the University of Chicago had launched the Center for Research and Security Prices back in the 30s or the 40s. And so they were ahead of their time, and so we were trying to do the same thing with marketing information. So when I was a brand manager, I was on the cheese business, and we were trying to decide, believe it or not, should Kraft stay in the natural cheese business? I mean, just think about that for a second. So being a young brand assistant, I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm like, you guys should be in the business. But we were losing market share. So all I did, we had all this pile of SAMI data. Remember the SAMI data? We're dating ourselves, right? This is the old school, just repositories of data. Well, I created a regression model that predicted market share because I wanted to see why we were losing market share. And we got an R-square of 0.8. But it was common sense. It was facing features, ACV distribution. You got to be in the store, you got to get the right displays, and you got to get the right number facing, right? Isn't that intuitive? But when you talk to the sales organization, I'm not throwing our sales organization on the bus. We heard all these stories as to why we were losing market share. But when you just dropped all the markets in this model, it basically said, you're not getting the distribution, you're not getting the facing. All the excuses went away. Then we did a reallocation of dollars. We said, okay, well, we used to literally, you remember this, everybody got the same pot of money. But we changed it. We said, well, if you can't drive your market share, I'm going to give it to the folks who are. You better believe that changed behavior. So I think the moral of this story, doesn't matter what part of the world, if you aren't using your data effectively, shame on you, because the data is typically there.
I know Maddox has to step away because it takes him longer to move, but thank you, Maddox, for being on the panel. Appreciate it.
Give Maddox a round of
Yes. Maddox has made it to the Chicago and then the Columbus event, so he's flown back and forth a couple of times here. Thank you. Go ahead. Oh, there's a question. Okay, great.
Thanks. I'm finding the data conversation to be fascinating. I worked in the media industry for about 15 years doing distribution. I actually used to work with CenturyLink as a partner, and then went over to the tech side. The Lieutenant Governor touched on broadband and broadband access earlier. And when I hear data, whether it's point of sale or I was in ad sales for a little while, looking at how we get data via Nielsen or someone else, for us, broadband was a huge area of concern in terms of how we're going to go beyond the coasts, to actually access data and then translate that data into sales. So is broadband access something that across your industries that is a concern for you? And if not, what would you say is one of your major concerns in terms of continuing to have access to data?
Then I'm going to pass it to him. Well, take the example that when I was talking about when COVID caused the shutdown, people couldn't go to the stores. So more people started using the internet. So you started hearing when companies reporting their earnings, you heard these incredible numbers of their e-commerce business. Well, I'm here to tell you that that hasn't slowed down. And like I think was said earlier, it just kind of accelerated that. If you want to grow your market share, you just got to be able to reach your people. It's just like you said, you're in the media business. It's all about reach and frequency. You can't get frequency without the reach. So I think that it's going to be important that, you know, you saw this during COVID where you heard that, you know, students couldn't, you know, get their lessons at school because they didn't have access to the internet. So I think, in my mind, that's one of the best infrastructure investments we can make. So I hope whatever Washington, D.C. does, they connect the world, because look what happened when we launched the World Wide Web in a big way during the 90s and 2000, and the explosion that happened. And I'll never forget a professor saying, this is it. He said, many of us won't live to see anything like this ever again. But there are people out there who just, you know, can't even be part of a meeting. You know, sometimes I'm on board calls with, Board Vantage and Board Pack and all these other things, and we'll have a speaker, and all of a sudden they freeze. And so I'm saying to myself, wow, we just missed out on an opportunity. So think about what's happening to the people who can't shop, who can't go to school, who can't get the online degrees. All the things that we're trying to create is going to go through the internet. So we have to make that investment.
Quickly, Joe, you know, one of the changes in data is to look at it and understand the actionability from it. So in the VC business, VCs get lumped together, which is really unfair because there's, each of us have different theses and different access points and everything else. But the truth is that because of the data, there is a refocus on early stage. There's a refocus on commercialization of college-based research. There's a refocus on certain things that manufacturing, which here in Chicago, and this refocus has turned the dollars and the amount of dollars here in Columbus, yeah. It's here in Columbus. Yeah. I'm still in Iowa. but that refocus, especially on manufacturing, is one of the things that Columbus is known for, and Ohio in general is known for, and that's what we're looking to do. Get that refocus from the data with VC dollars to do things that's never done before.
So as you were asking the question, I was trying to very much focus on what we do at Colley Capital. And the answer is nothing to date. But as the rest of the panel was speaking, our Colley Giving, which is our charitable and philanthropic arm, the last 2 years in a row has raised probably over $500,000 to get broadband in inner city school district areas for the kids of Cleveland, because that, when COVID came about, was a huge issue. So it wasn't necessarily how do we convert people into customers or how do we track their data, but our team, at least to some degree, has been focused on getting broadband, getting, you know, some kind of internet to the kids when they need it. So we're very philanthropic in that way, but we haven't converted them to customers yet.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate all of your insights, and I'm glad we strung it together somehow in a relevant way. So please give our panelists a round of applause. And they will be around, hopefully, in the breakout session, so you can go into more detail.
So if we could switch over to our last panel before the breakouts, focusing on a cluster of tech. We've got some new additions.
So I will once again start with broader concepts so we can tie in the number of panels we have. If you could give a 10-second background on yourselves, because I want to make sure the audience has a chance to ask questions, and also myself. And then I'll get right into it after that. I'll start on this side.
Sure. So hi, everyone. I'm Mark Appel, the CEO of Orange Grove Bio. We're a biotech holding company. We work with about 40 universities across the country, the real focus on the Midwest, and actually a real focus even more so on Ohio, to spin out early stage therapeutics ideas, take those forward into clinical stage, and spin them out as new companies. So we're sort of a company building other companies, and we've just recently moved our headquarters to Cincinnati. So excited to be here.
Hi, everybody. I'm Don Burton, and I'm the managing partner of Learn Capital, Learn Start, and we focus, we're a venture capital fund focused exclusively on the education, learning, and talent sector, and we do that at the earliest stages, early childhood development, all the way through K-12, higher ed, and workforce, L&D, learning and development.
Good afternoon. My name is Angela Gorin, and I'm the founder of Tap and Go Technologies. We are a neobank or challenger bank, both licensed in Canada and the US, and I'm looking forward to learning a little bit more about everybody on the panel. And aside from that, I'm also a professional athlete. So for those that obviously met me in the last couple of days, but there you go.
Hey, my name is Mohsin Masood. I'm the founder and CEO for Accrue. Accrue is a platform for fractional real estate investing with a primary and a secondary market. Now the pressure's on for me for the 10 seconds, so I'm going to end it right there. But Eddie.
Drop the mic. So my name is Eddie Vanderpaart, and I am founder and co-manager of Virtue Capital Partners, a impact early stage VC fund.
Hi, I'm Archie. I'm the founder and CEO of Cogni. We are based in New York. What we're looking to do is build America's first super app where banking, lifestyle, and commerce exist on a single application. How we look at the world is the whole Web 2.0 is moving from 2.0 to 3.0. So we are trying to build a layer on top of a banking ecosystem where you can take your money from physical world into the metaverse as well and bring them whole into one single ecosystem.
Hello, I'm Seth Hertline. I'm head of policy and government relations at the Stellar Development Foundation. SDF is a nonprofit organization that supports the Stellar blockchain, which is optimized for payments and digital asset issuance. And I am a registered crypto lobbyist, which makes me pretty rare.
Thank you very much for the quick intro. So I will start off by tying it all together with democratization, the use of information, whether it's tracing and tracking with blockchain, or it is making investing more available, or empowering brands to be able to access their users more easily and directly. So if and anybody can jump in if they'd like, and I'm going to pick on Eddie because, as he knows, you get called onto the panel last minute by Mark. You want to be put on the spot a little bit more by answering it first. So I'm going to pick on him. But if you could talk about what you see in terms of trends of empowering people with information and giving access to folks in terms of access to investing or other facets of the world we live in today.
Yeah, so this is really interesting. So I met Archie, I think, a week and a half ago. I met Angela, I think, 3 days ago, and I met you 2 days ago. And the business plans of all these guys are actually around democratization and about making and providing access to folks, services and products to folks who typically now don't have access. And so as much as I want to talk a lot about it, it's much more important for them because they can tell their story much better to see what it's about. But I'm definitely following these three kids here around because they're going to improve the world and change the world and make multiples on investors' money, which I happen to be in the business of that. So it's an important theme across impact and across, I think, almost all sectors that have to do with tech to do this. But I think you should ask those three people. That I highly recommend it.
Go for it. You can go first.
Well, I think to comment back on what Eddie just said, actually all three of us have already connected. So Archie, and we just met outside, right? So, and I think the best part that starts to show the ability and the movement and the access points, not just of founders, but also individuals that are out in the marketplace to be able to make access to what we're trying to innovate on. So we just struck a deal outside on blockchain, on innovation, and it's something that if we were trying to go to a traditional bank to try to make some of those access points, it could be months, it could be years. Government relations, it would be the same thing. So I think what's really innovative is you take a bunch of individuals that are trying to disrupt the marketplace and to address an audience that's absolutely out there that has a demand, we can fit it. So I think the uniqueness is that each one of our businesses, we have specific needs that we're trying to target for our audiences. So I think you could address the market that you're talking to, and maybe I'm going to pass the mic over, and then Archie should answer on the same point, because each one of our companies is in the fintech and the blockchain and has movement of what we're doing to cross barriers to different markets, but we're all focused on different markets. However, they align. How do they align?
So the single goal of democratizing access to capital, to wealth building, to benefits of utilizing the funds that you use already, that all comes together under that fact of democratization. And using technology for enabling that, be it blockchain, be it other aspects of it, it is really where it becomes super. Switching mics. Let's see if this works better. It's really where it becomes where it becomes very interesting. So we use blockchain as the underlying tech without having the exposure of crypto and enabling everyone to be able to invest in commercial real estate assets. So instead of $250K, now people can invest with $1,000, which is really nearly unheard of in the commercial real estate space. Similarly, whether it's providing benefits on the capital that you spend through neobanking or through Archie's product. And I'll pass it on, and I'll let you talk about your thing.
And we didn't rehearse this, by the way.
So all as organic as it gets, right? So. 61. Yeah.
Exactly. How we look at the world is the distribution of product, service, and content has been happening through social media, and that distribution is expensive, and the conversion is pretty bad, right? If you look at all the major banks in the world, they have a market capitalization of about $400 billion, and then you have internet and internet tooling companies have $1 trillion valuation, which means that the value leaves from the banking ecosystem and goes into the internet tooling ecosystem. And obviously, those internet companies were started to about providing value to the consumers, but that value chain has changed. They're extracting more value from the customers than actually providing value to the customers. So we said, as a financial institution, FDIC insured, we're going to be a bank, but then we started thinking, why can't your bank be your dating app? Why can't your bank be a ride-sharing company? Why can't your bank be your e-commerce company? And so that's what we went about building it. And then as we saw the discretionary spend happening so much, especially fast fashion, going out and spending more time on the internet, and as you know, the whole ecosystem was built on Web 2.0, we said, okay, why don't we go and build a Web 3.0 on top where you can actually start living within the metaverse. So that's how we think of our product vision. And we are trying to really bridge that delta of where the discretionary spend happens and trying to capture value at the banking layer. So that's what we're trying to do.
Don, could you comment on how this impacts the education edtech field?
Sure. Is that working? Yeah. So in the education space, obviously there's been a first wave of companies that have taken the content from MIT, Harvard, Stanford, and these great universities that were just servicing elite, very small classes of elite individuals, and they've made their courses available to the globe. And that started off in 2011 as what was called the MOOC, the Massively Open Online Courses. And basically what they did with the first technology is, just made it accessible. So if you wanted to take the best courses in machine learning at MIT, you could do that from India or anywhere, and you could do it for free, or if you wanted a certificate, you paid a nominal fee to get your certificate. And again, this is a perfect example of an amazing amount of access. But what we're starting to see now, and that was kind of EdTech 1.0, and what we're seeing now with EdTech 2.0 is like, well, geez, maybe we could do a little bit something different to help propel learning than just lecturing and having multiple choice questions, right? So in EdTech 2.0, you started to think about the affordances that technology gave you, and it wasn't just about accessibility, it was about how do we actually help people get competent at things in a more effective way. So you're starting to see things like, this is called EdTech 2.0, where you flip the classroom, and so you have personalized learning. So you watch the lecture before you get to a class, and then you do your worksheets, and the teacher walks around to small groups, and there's personalized learning where they understand what you know so that they can customize the content content to who you are. And that was kind of EdTech 2.0. And then EdTech 3.0 is like, geez, that's just taking the limited amount of stuff that we already do in the schooling model, and let's think about, you know, how does the real world work? How do people get competent in the real world? And it's not just about content distribution or information transfer. It's about, you know, feedback. Like I have to do something. I fail, or I'm as good as I am now, but I get feedback by someone better than me, and I start to develop an entire new judgment system and get really good because I'm getting scaffolded in that you know, competence that I care about or I want to get better at. So you're starting to see not only access in the EdTech space, but really transformation. And the gentleman just mentioned the metaverse. You know, a lot of different affordances enabled by the metaverse, and simulations are going to be really big in education, because instead of just reading about it, you go do it, and it's a simulation, and you can get AI feedback, and then get, you know, expert feedback and one-on-one feedback. It's going to just change you know, how people get really good at, competent at things that matter in the real world, instead of just becoming a good student or a good schooler. Because Google's done the research on this, that if you're a good schooler, you know, top at Harvard, Stanford, top 10%, it has no predictive value on how you're going to perform in that function at Google. And they've done the research. You know, if you're good at schooling, it means you're going to be good at schooling. And it does give you a huge amount of opportunity, because that's the only game we have in town. But, you know, there's the adult world's infinite amount of roles and responsibilities. So let's get people matched to where they can be in the top 10% of their competence. So that's a little bit about EdTech. Sorry for droning on.
Thank you. Any other panelists have comments on the edges there?
Sure. So clearly the biotech industry is a little bit of a different one. When we talk about democratization, we're not talking about everybody kind of stepping out and saying, how do I directly become a drug discoverer? That would probably not result in great outcomes. But there is really a democratization going on where historically you really had a couple of hubs, a couple of cities where pretty much all the drug innovation was occurring. It's not because the research was only occurring there. It's because the full ecosystems had sort of been built out. A lot of the money had made their bets, saying, okay, Boston, San Francisco, maybe a little bit New York, San Diego, these are the places where drug development happens. And what we're seeing now is more and more universities, really over the flyover states, as people call them, are opening up their doors and saying, actually, we have billions of dollars of academic research, and we're open for business. And if folks want to come here and work with us, there's a lot of more drug development that can occur and more therapies that can be brought to market and done so rapidly. And so that was really the idea behind Orange Grove, actually, our business, was we found these universities were asking for a solution, looking for a partner. If we could help bring some of that talent to bear, bring some of the financial resources to bear, we could get a lot more programs advanced. And we found that over the past several years, we've been able to do that with a good number of institutions. So there's different forms of democratization going on across different fields. I'd say maybe the biotech one's a little bit more opaque, but there is sort of a leveling of the playing field that's going on now, and a chance for more centers of excellence to emerge.
Thank you. So I'm going to hop over to another area of conversation. And so we're talking about democratization and data, and a lot of things driven off of that. In terms of the ethics of this, you know, we are all working with data on customers and users, et cetera. And obviously the big firms have certain policies, or you know, conveniently don't make any policies until they're forced to, or whatever the situation might be. But where do you think some of the challenges will be of using that data in an ethical manner to enhance returns or growth? Or you know, we had a comment from the last panel about the difference between good and great companies and being actionable, but how do we figure out some of the lines that need to be drawn, especially when if you combine the data of all of the panelists and their portfolio companies, for example, you may start to figure out a lot of detail about a particular person, from their real estate investment habits to their brand loyalties. You know, how do you think that space is going to evolve going forward? Any takers on that one? Tough question? Easy question?
It is a tough question, but it's a good one. Well, I look at the future of where are the next model of consumers, right? So you got to think about, I love the fact that the former panels were really looking at next gen. And there's a couple of founders in here that are next gen. And I think you have to look at like, where are they spending their time and their capital, right? Like looking at microfinancing to fracture and make investments in real estate, smart. So I always kind of think about who the person is. And data sovereignty is a number one. If you go and ask anybody that's coming out or is in university right now, their big goal is to have data sovereignty. So as we look at where forward movements are, is to really understand who the customer is. But if you respect that customer as a company and you build that into your policy and you let them know that that's how you're going to use their data, is to get to know them, which we're all about as businesses, your KYCs, that's so important. So I guess there's a trigger point of accountability and accessibility, and how do you align that? So it's really about being an honest company. And I think that's, as we build better businesses, there's the ethics that go into that. So I always personally, with Tap and Go Technologies, the number one thing, because we're both a B2B and a B2C market that goes into our neobank, I think the most important part is letting our small business owners know they have certain access points to the customers that are consumers of their brands. But at the same point in time, the customers are just equally as important because they are also the consumers of those brands. So it's letting them know they belong in an ecosystem that has an ethos. So it's really directing and making sure your policies are very clear to your customers. And I think we're seeing that out of the last decade, is for sure a lot of the tech companies that are out there were not necessarily making their policies so clear. So if you can put everything into a one-pager and say, this is what we're doing and this is how we do it, and we want you to be involved, then you're putting the power into the customer's hands to be involved and join.
Sept into the conversation too. How about in the metaverse, compensation or for engagement, like micropayments through crypto for your customers, for their attention, for their point of view?
Yeah, so interesting. So that's actually, so my company, Tap and Go Technologies, we actually specialize in rewards. So we've built into the ecosystem the ability, number one thing is, I guess, how many of you transaction today? How many people pulled out a card or your bank account or did an e-transfer of some sort, right? Did your bank pay you to do that? Or did the brand get any incentive as a small business owner? You're a small business owner in fashion design, right? How much does it cost to try to acquire a customer? So what we've built into the ecosystem of building a neobank that has specific niche verticals is the ability to lower the acquisition cost for the brand or the association or the organization, the fashion designer that owns that website, to actually get to the customer that's making that direct transaction with their card or their e-wallet. So now we've lowered your transaction, we've got you a great customer, and we can actually give you a better transaction because we're gonna ask the brand to give a part of what that acquisition cost she or he would have spent back to you. So that's how we're doing it through Tap and Go Technologies, and we're specializing moving forward. So hopefully that answers that.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So that's actually one of the best and most innovative use cases for crypto is micropayments, and we're seeing a lot of growth there. So on the Stellar network, there's I guess I should start just by saying that Stellar is a public permissionless blockchain, which means that anybody can use it, build on it whenever they want, right? There's no gatekeeper that controls access. There's no one that has to approve you to use the platform. And so one of the companies that is building applications on Stellar is called Satoshi Pay. They're out of Germany. And their first use case was micropayments for news articles. You know, so the sort of the subscription model of sort of online information, it's starting to sort of show its age a little bit, feel dated. People don't really like to you know, commit to you know, subscription payment models when they don't have to. And so Satoshi Pay saw an opportunity, and so what they do is they partner with content creators, news platforms, newspapers, things like that, and allow consumers to sort of buy an article at a time, right? And if you know, which you can do on blockchain, but it's hard if you want to pay sort of one-time payment using a credit card for a news article, right? The cost of the article might be 10 cents, but your, sort of your bank intercharge fee, to process a transaction is 30 cents or 50 cents, or whatever. The economics don't work. But blockchain doesn't care, right? It doesn't matter to the blockchain if your transaction is $100 million or a fraction of a cent, right? It's the same cost to process that transaction. And so, certain, and some blockchains are more efficient than others. Stellar happens to be very efficient, and so it's a great platform for those very small micropayments for news. But we're actually seeing it spread to other uses too, like music streaming and other forms of content. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the two biggest obstacles for the technology is, and they're somewhat intertwined, but government regulation is one, and then just sort of mainstream user adoption is the other. Blockchain and crypto still has a relatively steep learning curve. It's not quite as intuitive yet as other types of technologies. And I think the industry is very well aware of that and is working on making that more seamless. But there's still a lot of friction in becoming a crypto user. But on the other side, on the government side, I think it's very true. I'm sure everyone remembers the Ronald Reagan quote of the 9 scariest words in the English language, or "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." Well, the government is trying to help crypto a lot right now.
Any other questions from the audience? Okay. I guess I'm the #1 questioner today. So I'll switch over to kind of the vision for the future. I've had the pleasure of speaking to many of you over the last it feels like months now, as we've gone through Chicago, Detroit, Cincinnati, and then here in Columbus. Where do you think your space is going to be 5 years from now? Let's just go with 5, because some amazing things will happen in 10. So, but where do you think your space will be in 5 years from now?
That's Pandora's box, probably for most of the panelists here, since these industries are moving so quickly. And probably 5 years ago, we couldn't have predicted where we would be. And probably 5 years ago, we couldn't have predicted where we would be in most of those spaces today. I can tell you on the health side, I think you're seeing a lot more of an integration across spaces, whereas historically you would have said there's a space called biotech where people are developing drugs. There's a space called health tech where people are trying to figure out delivery of care. There are hospital systems. There are kind of people working on certain digital therapeutics now, which start to bridge across some of these lines. You have people working on AI solutions and how that plays into the health industry. You're seeing a confluence of all of these, and you're seeing most of the companies approaching multiple of these different angles simultaneously. And obviously, everybody's kind of aware of some of these trends happening, even the big companies, and they're starting to, whereas you would never have thought an insurance company would be investing in a health tech solution for patients or investing in a drug. You're seeing some of these things happen now. And so it's I think, pretty fantastic. It means a lot more collaboration across the industry. I mean, by the time we're all meeting 5 years from now, we may not just be folks who are in adjacent industries that are figuring out where they overlap and how to do deals. We'll be figuring out how to do a healthcare banking deal, potentially. So I think you're going to see more of this confluence of the industries as kind of innovation moves forward. So.
Totally agree. And in the education space, again, I think that you're going to see, we're at a historic inflection point, I really think, because we're moving from, a system we invented for the industrial age, and we haven't quite figured out what the system looks like for the innovation age, but there's certainly, everyone can agree that, the fourth industrial revolution is going to require a completely different skill set than kind of the skill sets that we're looking for at outcomes. Those are necessary, but not nearly sufficient for the innovation age. And so we're really going to transition from the way we do education now to a completely different way, and we really don't fully understand what that's going to look like. But certainly, it's going to be continuous learning. So it's not going to be, oh, I go to school early in my career, I'm done, I get my degree, and then I never learn again. I just, stay at the same job. That's not going to happen, right? So you're going to have the melding of future of work and the future of education. So if I want to get better at something and get competent at something in the real world, you're going to have schools aren't going to be these kind of arbitrary places that are up on the hill that you go to. Like school is going to come to you in your workflow. Wherever you need to be really good and competent at something, you're going to have people showing up, giving you feedback, and giving you one-on-one mentoring, giving you peer-to-peer mentoring, really interesting ways of scaling it. So I think you're going to see, continuous learning happening throughout your career. It's not going to be like I get my degree and I'm done. And then you're going to see a very, very different way of capability building. It's not just going to be information transfer and multiple choice tests. It's going to be, I got to do things, I care about things, I got to do things, and then I get feedback and I manage my attention about what's working, what's not, and I develop my judgment system, which is a very different way of getting competent and going up the competence curve.
I guess in the space that I'm in, from the neobank standpoint, I think what's really neat is this phase that we're going to see in the next year, 2 years, 5 years for sure, of open banking and DeFi. So when you think about making a payment here or over in Europe or overseas in the Asia Pacific market, it doesn't matter where or what you're transactioning, you'll be able to whip out your tap and go and contactless mobile payments and not be charged this huge astronomical international fee to actually transaction. And I already see the intersect between health and Edtech, even with what we're doing because of the verticals, like talking about specific niche markets. We're already looking at, especially in the US, I come from Canada, the US, your health space is very expensive and not much affordable, right, when it comes to health insurance. So one of the major things we've already started to look at is the health savings account. And our first vertical focuses on healthy living and how do we make healthy living more accessible and affordable for everybody, and that includes insurance. So I think it's really neat to have organizations looking at using the marketplace we've built with brands that are healthy living as their HSAs, and how can they incentivize and use that to be able to reward themselves with cash that they use on day-to-day spend to afford the insurance to live an active and a more healthy lifestyle. So there is crossovers, and the same can go with education. So I'm excited about where open banking is going. I'm very excited about where we can do more data sovereignty and also the DeFi market. So.
Yeah, so our industry in 5 years is a little tricky, right? So we're in two different industries. We're in real estate, and then we're utilizing blockchain. Real estate is something that moves at a snail's pace and is now at a point where it's changing drastically. We're disrupting the industry. There's other technology out there that's disrupting the real estate transactional processes in different ways, or real estate management side of things. But blockchain side of things is what I'm really keen to see where it goes in 5 years. I think the biggest aspect is the differentiation between blockchain and crypto in itself. Crypto is a subset of blockchain. Blockchain is more of a general purpose utility. Yes, having been it's a byproduct of the Bitcoin, but the distributed ledger technology is something that can really change and have a major impact over the next 5 and 10 years. If you compare it to the internet, in the year 2000, how many people would have thought that they were going to be buying books online, that Blockbuster was going to go out of business thanks to Netflix or other streaming services? And it took a good 10 to 12 years for that adoption to take place. Blockchain, on the other hand, is happening lightning fast compared to that. Adoption on the blockchain, be it for cryptocurrencies, be it in metaverse, be it in the supply chain world, be it in real estate like us, is happening a lot faster than the internet world came into being. It's 5 years is like a lifetime when we talk about such technologies, and it is going to be, in my opinion, going to have a major impact. I was on a panel with Hester Price earlier, a few months ago, one of the SEC commissioners, and we were talking about how the securities world is going to completely change. Whether it's going to be tokens, security tokens, or NFTs, or what kind of digitization is going to happen, it's definitely going to be on a distributed ledger. It's definitely going to use the efficiencies of it. There's networks like Stellar, which have their own benefits and their own efficiencies, like micropayments, one of the best platforms out there for it. And every protocol has its own benefit to it, but as you see, these are changing every day, and there's a lot of improvement that's happening, but at the same time, a lot of innovation that's happening. And the more we see the adoption of blockchain in a way or in a mechanism that's user-friendly, like Coinbase introduced cryptocurrency trading, or like we're aiming to introduce real estate investing, while we're using blockchain, you don't have to download a crazy wallet, or you don't have to do all of these customer inefficient mechanisms. We've tried to streamline the processes for it. And the more adoption you see with more streamlined user interface and user experiences, the faster this adoption will go through.
Thank you. If we could do the rest in 30 seconds each, that would be great. We're out of time, so yeah, if we could keep going and just 30-second thoughts on where you see things developing.
I agree, Mohsin. The development of technology in general will even rapidly increase from here, and not only stay stable. So in terms of impact investing, which I'll make my comment on that one, impact right now is typically some type of check in the box or ESG, or maybe I can get it if lucky. So impact as sort of a tool, that's sort of where we are right now. But impact investing, particularly driven by the younger generation, my kids, your kids, will be a weapon and also requirement for us. And by the way, for all of us, all of our companies, because people will look for additional value, not just shareholder value. And so double bottom line thinking in many ways will become sort of the norm. And which I'm super excited about, and that's why we jump on this bandwagon. I think in all of our companies, that's sort of a necessity. The big part in our conversation going forward will be governance, and will be an understanding of how to integrate that in companies, and that's where we are very early innings of.
I mean, we think very linear, and the technology is always very exponential. And many a time, as a founder, when I see the world in the next 5 years, we start looking at, with Cogni, innovating on two sides, one on Web 2.0 and one on Web 3.0. In Web 2.0, what we did was anyone who has a direct deposit with us, we give them mobile phone insurance, travel insurance, purchase protection, emergency dental, rideshare, extended warranty, everything for free. We don't charge them anything at all. And then next month, we are launching a product where you can actually borrow $1,000 at 0% interest, paid back in few installments. And this week, we are going live with a unique functionality that every time you make a transaction, you would be able to see the carbon footprint on every single transaction and how you can make it a net zero. Well, that's 2.0 development. And as you said, 3.0, there's a whole group of people who don't understand what is metaverse. It's like saying, hey, what is cloud? It took a lot of time for people to understand where is my stuff going. So we said, okay, we're going to build the tooling, then when you can take your $1,000 and take it to the metaverse world and spend it. So we are very closely working with Solana and FTX. They're our biggest partners. Obviously, we'll be releasing that partnership very soon, but this audience is the first to know about it. We are very excited to work with them. Sam, who's the founder of FTX, I see him as a phenomenal guy. He's been playing 4-dimensional chess. He's the only entrepreneur I've seen play 4-dimensional chess, especially with this whole ecosystem, whether lobbying, making sure that regulatory frameworks work with them. So what we are trying to do is build a tooling system where people in the Web 2.0 can go into Web 3.0 and play a lot more efficiently without all those complicated, mumble-jumble words that we don't have to worry about, making the UI and UX a lot more simpler. So that's how we see the innovation happening. And we want to be the platform of choice to make that happen. So we are very, very focused on simplifying complicated stuff and making things a lot easier for the consumers. That's how we look at it.
So I guess one of the benefits of going last is you have the most time to think about your answer. So I think very quickly, in the crypto and blockchain space, 3 things that I think we'll see in 5 to 10 years. And they sort of build on each other. The first is, I think we're going to see sort of the complexities of crypto from a user perspective get abstracted away. And so it sounds like some of the things that you're working on, what I mean by that is people will be using blockchain in the background without even knowing it. I think once that happens, that opens the door for two other things. So first, I think blockchain is increasingly going to be incorporated behind the scenes in lots of different industries. I think it's going to eat finance, but it will spread out to a lot of other industries as well. Again, I think behind the scenes. I don't, I think for blockchain to work, it's got to be easy, and I think it'll get there. And then, so if you combine those two things, I think brings me to my last point that I think we'll see is, these large, sort of gatekeepers to our data and our computing power. Folks like Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud, those sorts of things are going to face some serious competition from decentralized, more trustless blockchain alternatives. And you mentioned Solana. We're seeing, there's sort of a direct competitor to AWS and Google Cloud now on Solana, where you can store data infinitely for a fixed upfront price. You don't sort of have to pay rent to Amazon. Things like that. So I think those are the three things to look out for. And the fourth thing that I'll mention to keep an eye on is Sam Bankman-Fried from FTX. He's a sharp guy. Keep your eye on him.
Please help me in thanking another great set of panelists. Thank you very much.
Come join our 361 firm community of investors and thought leaders. We have a lot of events created by the community as we collaborate on investments and philanthropic interests. Join us.